Welcome to Directly Correct, a Pingless podcast with Cole and Scott. Today's guest, Ron Hetrick, Vice President and Senior Labor Economist at Lightcast.
Thanks to our sponsors, Lightcast. The world is full of talent data, but more data can lead to more questions, uncertainty, and stagnation as organizations sift through it to figure out what's fact from what's fiction. Lightcast talent intelligence platform answers your most difficult workforce questions to drive meaningful business results. With more than 20 years of experience as MC in Burning Glass, Lightcast accelerates your work, bringing together hundreds of billions of vetted, constantly updated data points and incredible insights to drive strategic talent decisions. Your organization can tap into the deepest open repository of skills, supply, and demand data in the world to transform your hunches into a skills-based future for your organization. Lightcast's flexible solution, used by 67 of the Fortune 100, can integrate your own data, be guided by in-house talent experts, and give you the tools and confidence to explore it for yourself. To learn more, book a demo at lightcast.io. All opinions are our own and do not reflect those of any other organization.
What do you think about for the next Cole and Scott, just doing the toxoplasmosis screening?
Oh, you remembered the word. We couldn't remember it last time.
Yeah. I ruminated until I figured it out.
I've already got 5 articles to talk to you about. I bank all the random ones for those episodes.
I love it. Hit me with a teaser. You got anything up right now?
Let me see a good one.
I'll forget about this in like 5 weeks.
Well, Herman Aguinis wrote something about the implications of generative AI in social science, and I was like, yes, please give us more. That's
fascinating right there. But I don't want to get into the actual article, but I mean, I'm already seeing like implications for like writing style. And
was it you? Somebody showed me the other day that the words like there's certain words that ChatGPT uses way more than
I have not seen that.
Okay, there's certain words that ChatGPT uses way more than normal society does, and they did like a plot of the usage of those words over time in academic articles, and they've seen this huge spike upwards
recently.
So it's what they're using to show that scientists are using this to write articles. I thought that was fascinating.
That is fascinating. I don't think there's anything necessarily wrong with that. Like we used, Word has like built-in dictionaries, etc.
Mm-hmm.
And you can change words in there. It's like another tool. But as long as you're, I don't know, not letting ChatGPT write the actual research or like change the meaning, I guess is the point. Change the actual meaning of what's going on.
Yeah, like it's like, it doesn't sound like what we're writing about. I don't know, have you seen anything interesting that's come up lately about, interesting articles out there?
Anything out in the world out there?
Anything
out there? I haven't been collecting lately. I've been on vacation mode, really.
Well, I'm sure Ron's seen some stuff. Ron, you always got.
As far as movies or what?
Yeah, sure. Hit us with the movie.
So I will say sometimes I watch things really late and it works out really well. So on my flight back from California 2 days ago, I watched Dune. So finally saw it right in time for the second one to come out. And all I can say is this: I would be really disappointed if I had seen the first Dune when it first came out, because it's not a whole movie. It's part of a movie. And I was sitting there going, oh, thank goodness number 2's coming out. Like I would just be sitting here going, really? I feel like I got gypped here. But yeah, that's my spicy egg. And I've been watching Masters of the Air lately, which I know has also been out for a while, and that's so good. Yeah, all over the place.
It's like when Sherlock had the nice like 2-year hiatus in between the cliffhanger and when they actually paid it off. It's a deep cut from like 10 years ago, and I'm still scarred by it.
I will tell you, watching stream shows years after they've been done, which is what my wife and I did with Downton Abbey. I mean, I think it had been done for 5 years, and my wife and I got into it, and you just go. We watched all of them. We watched the movies all in like one shot. I think that we're on to something here. Unfortunately, you can't have any conversations with people for like a decade, but because you're so out of date. Yeah,
You like remember that show Lost? Oh, it's so
yeah, yeah,
great.
yeah.
I'm watching it right now. Like, yeah,
Really?
that ended like 2010. Like, no one cares.
Yeah, I know there's a comedian who talks about like when you wait a long time to see a movie, and then you sit around going, "Oh, I want to talk about it," and they're like, "That movie came out 7 years ago. I mean, I want to talk about it now."
It turns out he was dead the entire time.
Yeah.
I have the funniest story for that movie. Okay, the what is it?
Sixth Sense. Sixth
Sixth Sense.
Sense.
Okay, best story you're ever gonna hear. My wife had not seen the movie. A friend, thinking she would never see the movie, a friend of hers said, "Well, I'll kind of give away the secret." So I had not seen the movie either, and we finally are getting to watch it. And my wife's like, "I know what's going to happen." I said, "Don't you dare ruin this for me! Like I cannot tell you how angry I'm going to be if you ruin this for me." So we watched this whole movie, and she's got this thought in her head. So we're watching this whole movie. Well, it gets to the end, the big reveal. And then it happens, and I'm sitting there going crazy. Oh my gosh, I can't believe this. I had no idea and everything. And then the credits roll, and she goes, no joke. Well, when are they going to show that he was a woman?
What?
Her friend had
Someone gave her bad information. I
yeah,
love
they
it.
purposely misled her, and it was see, it kind of ruined the movie for her because she spent the entire movie trying to figure out the clues that were going to reveal that Bruce Willis was a woman, and she had to end up watching it again. But I just remember laughing to the point of tears when she said that. I'm like, what? What did they tell you?
The best part about that movie is it's far more plausible that this poor guy like upset his wife so much that she wouldn't talk to him for the entire movie. Then he's dead.
Nate Bargatze's bit on that is so outstanding.
Yeah.
He's like, it's way more believable for a guy to go. I mean, I get it. It's a movie about marriage. I love how he says that.
And I think we covered it here like a while ago, but I remember seeing some research that actually shows that spoilers make watching a cliffhanger movie or TV show more enjoyable than if you haven't had it spoiled.
Because you got some
Right.
secret knowledge. You got
I would
secret
debate
insight.
that. Not for me personally. I love when a director is so brilliant at hiding something without being ridiculous. And that's the thing what M. Night did in Sixth Sense, which I absolutely adored, is that when you go back and watch the movie, it's perfect. Like you realize that you really weren't paying attention. And then when you know it and you watch it again, you're like, wow,
Yeah.
it was so brilliantly shot that you constantly think, well, yeah, I mean, this happened or that happened. I've seen other movies where they so desperately want a twist ending that they lie to you. It's like, oh, the killer's this person, and you're like, who's that person? You know, I mean, there's no way it could have been them. So yeah, I all credit goes to him for being able to pull that off. And I mean, he did it to me again in what was the one that the group in the forest and everything?
The Village.
Oh,
Was
not
that
The
Signs.
Village.
Village?
Yeah.
The Village. And I just was so. Once again, I'm like, you go back and you watch it, and like, daggone, it all does make sense now. And there's a lot to be said for good writing, good directing.
He's multi-talented. He ghost wrote She's All That.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
What?
Crazy.
Yeah. M.
You
Night
talking about
Shyamalan.
that '90s movie where?
Yeah,
the-
she's like the
there's like a high
ugly
school-
duckling. Yeah, and then
Yeah.
they bed and like take her to prom. Yeah.
He started a whole genre.
Kind
I
of
feel like
did.
there's been 20 of those movies.
It's funny because lately it doesn't seem like he can make things that people enjoy, but boy, he came out of the gates firing on all cylinders. I love the Sign. Sign's one of my it's a top 8, top 10 movie for me easily. Love Sign.
Oh yeah.
Sign.
I'm right there with you, man. I love it's one of those movies that even if I pick it up, like if I saw it on TV halfway through, it's like I'm watching this.
Always,
You know?
always. And there's so many movies that I really like, but I kind of like, I don't feel so there. But my poor wife, anytime Caddyshack, if I catch a second of it, I'm in. And that's probably 200-300 times that I've seen that movie at this point. But I think Signs is probably one of the very few serious movies that I kind of really think I'm in. Like, and it just gives you it's such an interesting feeling that you get when you watch it, because what he did was he just made you think for the first time ever. You'd seen so many alien movies, but he did a great job of making you think like, what would be your reaction?
Yep.
Oh yeah.
And I think that no one had really taken it from the perception of what about the person just sitting in their home and they're just
Yeah.
like, and you see the news, like your thoughts would just be crazy. Like I love that aspect of them feeling this thing and then feeling it on a personal level. Obviously, was good, but I really
As
more like
opposed
that.
as opposed to Independence Day, where they like literally hijack an alien ship and they're fighting the aliens
My
from
God,
their own ship. It's
Both
like,
plausible. Both
silly.
plausible.
Yeah, I
yeah,
love the fact that in his how they talked about the lights. Was it above LA or something? Like there was these lights in the sky, and they were also above like Rio or something. And I thought, if I'm watching the news and I'm seeing that, I mean, for the first time in your life, you start going, "My goodness, what would I think?"
Have you heard of the Battle of LA where like supposedly an alien ship literally came over LA and people were firing at it with guns?
I was just in LA. I think the aliens won. Of course.
I haven't been there in a while. Is it a bit desolate?
I enjoyed it. It was a good place.
yeah. Well, I think you had a riff on "Don't Look Up," the movie
Yeah.
that came out. I think it was Netflix. What's going on there?
Speaking about seeing movies well after they come out, let's talk about Don't Look Up. Yeah,
Yeah.
I had been out speaking for quite a while, and sometimes I would get off the stage and talking to people, or maybe that we'd be eating afterwards, and people would come up to me and they'd be like, "Oh wow, this is so like Don't Look Up," and have you seen that movie? And every time I was like, "No, I haven't seen it," but they're like, "Oh, you should totally see it." And
He said it hasn't been 10 years yet.
yeah,
Can't
I
watch
gotta
it.
wait. I gotta wait till
Yeah.
everything's been kind of said about it, and then I'll watch it and weigh in on it, like I'm doing right now. So I finally see this movie, and if you have anybody who hasn't seen it, or if you have, the very concept of people not focusing on something that's really, really important because just the fluff of everyday life is more interesting to people. And that it just was incredible because especially when I was first on the road and talking, there was some issues that the US was dealing with that were just so transient and so cliche of the day type of problems. And I'm sitting around there going, we're headed towards a catastrophic labor shortage. I'm not quite sure how we're going to eat in like 4 years to 8 years.
Mhm.
And people were just like, yeah, but did you hear like AI could do this? And I'm like, oh my goodness, that no, like you're thinking of the wrong things right now. Like, but another movie that when you're watching it, you just think my daughter does the same thing I do for a living now. And one thing I told her is welcome to labor economics because you're now inside the matrix. And as cool as it is understanding why things are going on when a lot of other people don't understand why things are going on, it is also the most frustrating thing ever because people are always out there going, well, I think this is happening because of this. And you're like, no, it's the labor shortage. Well, I think this is happening because of this. No, that's because no one wants to do the manual labor jobs anymore. They're all going to college, and you have all the data and you have all the facts, and you hear everybody kind of saying, well, it's political or it's this and that, and you're like, no, it isn't. It's actually this right here. And oh gosh, it's so
So
frustrating.
let's back up. Like, what is going on?
What do you mean?
I,
I
I, I
mean,
mean,
that's a pretty broad question, right? What's going on?
what's going on in your
Well,
world, Ron?
I'll tee it up, Ron, because like last year we met at the
Mhm.
Lightcast conference. I was just telling Scott this before the podcast started. I was like, I have all these questions about the economy, and I see you sitting over like at the bar somewhere, and I just like go up to you, introduce myself, and I start bombarding you with all my
Everybody
questions
does.
about the economy. And I swear to God, it maybe not for you. It was like the best conversation I've
I
ever
appreciate
had.
that. That's a very kind. My wife hates when I do that, but yeah, sure. She's like, no one wants to hear you talking. I'm like, you'd be surprised how many people want to hear me talking. No.
When it actually predated the presentation that you gave there
Mhm.
about who's going to do the work,
Yeah.
right? And I think that's really kind of what we're getting into here. And I'll just for the people who watch on video, I'll just share like a little bit of the presentation here. But when I hit on it, you touched on a few things a second ago. It's like what's going on with people going to college,
Yeah.
demographic shifts in terms of like baby boomers retiring, birth rates being low, how inflation is tied to all of that, and then how immigration plays a
Yeah.
role in how we go do these things. And so I don't know if you want you go whatever direction you want to go with that, but
Sure.
I found it fascinating.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. And I think, I've been speaking almost every week this year when I thought I was going to dial it back. And I think that that's what I appreciate about it and why it's always so hard to say no is that it's amazing how many people it's the don't look up, how many people aren't aware of something that's happening all around them. When you explain it to them, it all kind of clicks in. But I think when we wrote Demographic Drought, which we were actually in the process of rewriting right now, we're going to have the rewrite done probably this summer, and it's going to really kind of dig back in depth, detail out the data that we kind of found and how it's played out, and then just that we know so much more. But when I was going around the country talking about demographic drought in these keynotes, one thing just kept sticking in my mind, and it was this mismatch that we have between the jobs that are open and the people that would fill those jobs. Historically speaking, we're in a country that just preached STEM shortage, STEM shortage, STEM shortage for decades.
Yeah.
And you think, well, that's the thing, right? And you go, funny enough, that's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about are laborers, people who work in essential industries like food, like if you'd like to eat, or housing, if you'd like to have a house that's not only up, but you'd like to maintain. Community work like cops and firefighters and people who fixed your car, garbage collection, and all of these companies that were saying, we can't find people. I've traveled around the country and I've had people say, we can't find cops. Like we just don't have anything here. We don't even know what to do. And I just spoke to somebody from a state at the conference I was just at, and he's like, we can't find corrections officers anywhere. We had to lower the age of hiring to 19 to find corrections officers, which
Holy cow.
fascinating to think about. But you look at all this, and I'm going to give you one stat that really will drive this home. And it's a stat that, shame on me, I just pulled about a month ago, and I've just started using it in presentations. Since the beginning of the pandemic, we go back to February 2020, the U.S. labor force has grown by 3.7 million. This is the above 25-year-old, but grown by 3.7 million, okay? So remember that in our head. The U.S. labor force has grown 3.7 million. 4.5 million of that 3.7 million are people with a bachelor's degree. Now do the math. I just gave you a number that's bigger than your other number. So
yeah, it's like that's not even possible, right?
It's possible only if you have a subtraction.
Okay.
So our labor force has purely grown for people with a bachelor's degree. Otherwise, it shrunk. People without degrees are shrinking. So if we look right now at our job openings, we have a lot of people who are like, I don't even believe these anymore. I think BLS is making this up. They don't have great sample sizes, blah, 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 blah. I hear this all the time. And what it really is coming down to is the country is hiring. The country is hiring a very specific person. It wants service people. It wants, like I say, and anybody hasn't heard me say this, they're probably sick of me saying it for people who have, but we're a service industry, but there's no one here to service. So it's like that concept is what we're seeing. If you look at, we were looking at our Lightcast postings last month, 9 out of the top 10 jobs don't require a college degree. The most advertised jobs, RNs are the only one that do, and they're at the top. And we're just so massively behind. And a lot of people are like, well, aren't those jobs like always going to be at the top? And I'm like, there's a difference. They're at the top in the past because it was volume. Now they're at the top because the professional jobs have just all fallen off. We're not doing a ton of professional hiring in this country right now. But those things are perpetually going to be broken. And that's where we could take this any direction, immigration, anything. Like, how do you fill those jobs? Because when I wrote Who's Going to Do the Work, and as I'm starting to put together this next article, the thing that we really want to focus on is what I called the math problem. And that is, we have all of these boomers that retire, and people hear that all the time, but I want to phrase it this way. Every time someone retires, they go from being a producer to a consumer. So now they need, but they're no longer producing. So our ratio in the US is a couple 100,000 different. So the people leaving the labor force retiring is a couple 100,000 more than young people who are coming into the labor force, just age, just 65 to 16. And that is something that will obviously get remarkably worse going forward through the next decade. And people are like, well, a smaller population, that's not a bad thing. I'm like, yeah, in and of itself, that's great. Unfortunately, you have to go through this patch where a huge population, it's like a tree. All of these people who retire become the top of the tree. So now you have this huge tree, but the trunk of the tree is very small. And so in the past, like right now, We have an age dependency ratio of 46%, meaning that 46% of the country is relying on 54% to take care of them. In 2030, it's 60%. 60% of the country is going to be relying on 40% to take care of them. And take care of them means a lot of things. It does mean eating. It does mean
Yeah.
healthcare at a time we're really going to need. So all of those things.
I think China's going through the same issue right now
Oh, are
too,
they
where
ever? Are they
yeah.
ever? Yeah, the one child policy, no one really thought, well, what happens if you fast forward that? Like, what about the generation that was before the one child policy?
Mm-hmm.
And who's going to take care of them? And I think that's, it's a fascinating aspect of this is it's in the long run, you go, well, China's probably, I think everybody was concerned about overpopulation. Well, that myth has been exploded.
Yeah.
Don't worry about that. That's
It's a
definitely
big
not our
country.
concern.
You're okay.
Yeah, I feel like that's I always tell people I'm the myth buster, and one of the biggest myths we have to bust is I still hear people talking about the population, whatever it is, that clock or whatever, and I'm like, get your eyes off that clock. That clock is irrelevant. The article just came out that we're probably overestimating our population growth by 20% right now. It's going to turn way faster, and the reason is it's simple. Less people have less children. And when you have less children, that's less people who then have less children. So it's
Right.
an exponential problem, not a linear problem. And that's what no one really took into account.
And there seems to be like cultural mores around having fewer children these days as well. I mean, like obviously back in the past, you'd have like 6 kids and maybe 4 would survive.
Yeah.
You call that lucky, and they'd help you out on the farm and this sort of thing. Where now it's like idiocracy, right? People are waiting to get a college degree.
Well,
Like, oh,
yeah.
I can't wait till my 401k is a little bit more solid and the economy's not right. Maybe we'll have a kid in about 5 years. Smash cut to like the high school football player and the cheerleader.
You're absolutely spot on, Scotty. There's a guy, can't remember his name. You can Google the movie. It's called Birth Gap. Now you have to go to the site. The first one's free. I never watched the other two because the first one just nailed it. And his point was he did the research. What he found out was it's not that people are having less children. The people who have children still have around the same number of children that they had. It's that way more people don't have any children. And so you have people that, sometimes when I'm presenting, they're like, well, I'm doing my part. I've got 4 children. I'm like, you're not the problem. It's the fact that so many couples now don't have children. In the movie, he travels around the world because this is a worldwide phenomenon in every developed nation.
Yeah.
And so he talks to these women, and I'm telling you, it's the only thing that changes is the language because they all say the exact same thing. Well, life came at me a little faster than I thought. I'm older than I thought I was going to be when I decided I wanted to have children. And so it's not that there's this, war against having children per se, which I think some people have that perception. It's just that in your goals of kind of reaching your own peak, you find out that it's hard to find other things to do. And one of the things that I have in a slide that I talk through now is it's like you can't serve 2 masters essentially. We've told women, they do these things. They're in the workforce, and then they get in the workforce. Well, you can't sit there and go, well, like Japan, have children, and they're like, but I'm needed in the
opportunity
workforce.
cost,
And
right?
It's a trap because once they're in, because they have to stay in because now we need them to take care of our aging population. They can't leave now because now we have a shortage of people. So it only gets exponentially worse as it goes forward. I truly believe a lot of women would love to have children or have more children, but it's just so difficult.
I don't know why, but I blame Cole for this.
How is this my fault?
I'll find a reason eventually.
Well, I don't even know how to react to that. It's like
you know what you did. You know what you did.
Fair enough. I want to come back to something here too, though. Like you mentioned by 2030, there's going to be this 60-40 shift roughly, and that's like overnight in terms of like how time progresses. What do you see that's going, like, what are the downstream consequences of that shift between now and 2030?
Yeah.
What should we be prepared for? And like one of the things, again, and going back to your presentation of who's going to do the work is like, this is one of the reasons why inflation is existing. I always thought, is because monetary policy or what the Fed does. I don't know anything about any of those things, but how does this play a role in that?
Sure. Great question. So if we look at our current Fed chairman, pal, he was a big fan of Paul Volcker. Now, critical aspects here, something I really try to hammer in when I speak. Paul Volcker was the Fed chairman back in the 80s and such, when we had this massive, not only do we have a massive labor supply, but it's the boomers in the prime working ages of life. Massive, more than we had ever imagined we would ever be able to grow a labor force, unprecedented growth in labor force. So you didn't have to do much to hurt the economy to get interest rates up to pull inflation down. So he tried to do the same maneuvers. And he's like, well, we're going to get the unemployment rate up to like 4.5%. And the whole time I'm going, no, you're not. That's impossible. There are less people now collecting unemployment in this country than there were in 1970. And our population is 106% larger than it was back then. So you have to understand, like, this, it's such a finite amount of people. It's actually been going down the past couple of weeks. We're having a record number of retirements this year. If you look at people who say I'm out of the labor force, the growth, the net change that we've had, more than 80% of that change is for people over the age of 55. This is an entirely different world than we used to have. So if you go back to 21 and 22, we had all these people leave the labor force, a lot of them being older. And we didn't have anybody coming in. And we had no immigration because we had closed the consulates down during this time. So didn't have any, but it was a very small amount versus what we had. And so what you have is all of these service industries, manufacturing industries have all this demand. What I was just talking about, people become consumers, but there's no producers. So this happened at an unbelievable and unprecedented historical amount in 21 and 22. And as a result, inflation goes way up. Well, think about, what did you see? Where was the inflation at? Well, eggs, food products, fast food went up like 30% in like a year. And you go, well, who works in those industries? Well, it's typically like high schoolers or immigrants or things like that. Well, we don't have those people anymore. So when you start to look at that, what was it going to take to stop that problem? And that's when I started tracking, and I presented this in what Cole saw. I started tracking the immigrant flow. And when the immigrant flow broke its previous kind of 3 or 4 year trend and started spiking up, you can put those lines on. Immigration goes up and inflation goes down. And people go, wow, the Fed did a great job. I'm like, no, the Fed didn't do anything. The Fed did freeze the private equity market, which is good. That kind of eased back the hiring on IT workers and such. But it really was the opening kind of the gates to get these people back in to populate these lower skilled jobs. That's where you feel inflation. You do not feel inflation. No, none of us feel inflation when Apple pays a little bit more to an app developer to do something. Because if anything, you buy that phone maybe on a plan once every 3 years. Where you're going to feel it are those day-to-day transactions that you're doing. And those are the industries most affected by worker shortages. So that's how
they interjected low cost labor into the system, which actually lowered the cost of everything. I.e., like you go to a egg producer, out in the middle of Texas somewhere, or cut your lettuce, etc., and that's going to actually lower the cost of these sort of day-to-day goods.
Yeah, I got stories that I say in private that I won't say here, but I'll just tell you that
nobody's listening. Nobody's listening.
The border is filled with a lot of winks. Basically,
wait, what?
There's a lot of winking. There's a lot of like, okay, I always feel the way I say it live is, look, when you see these videos of all these people lined up at the border, do you believe they're all standing in line so they can be told to go home? Like, you understand the complete silliness of that? Don't you think that they're human beings? They have a brain. They know exactly why they're standing in that line. They know that most of them are going to go through. And I think that this is the big thing. So that the numbers that just came out, which you probably saw, 3.3 million immigrants came into the country last year. About 2.6 million probably were undocumented. About 1.8 million of those will go into the labor force. So anybody's an asylum seeker, they have to wait like 120, 150 days, I can't remember which one, and then they can work. So this is what's happening, is there is a tacit understanding amongst all political parties that, look, our constituents are crying, they're dying for labors, for construction and for farms and eggs and everything like that. But instead of coming out and saying that's what we want to do, you just kind of wink and nod and get these people in. And, I think one of the sides that I present when I speak is there's a lot of myths about illegal immigrants. And that is, we don't know how many are here. We don't know where they live. We don't know like what jobs they do. They deal fentanyl. And we found that all that data is out there. We do know where they live. We know what jobs they're in. We know everything about them. it just, we have to do, it's some work that we have to do, I think, to harness them as a strategic asset. And I think that's where we keep kind of falling down as a country.
Well, like to your point, I'm starting to see videos pop up. Obviously, it's probably isolated events, but migrant Venezuelans fighting with migrant Mexicans at Home Depot because the Venezuelans will perform home repair cheaper.
Oh my
Right?
God.
Like
I have not
you can
seen
go to
that
Home.
video, but that's
Yeah, it's
fascinating.
wild. It's a sub economy that we're dealing with.
So many things could be fixed by just simply, this is my thing when I speak. It's time for adult conversations. I mean, we've been doing this. I do explain in great detail why is it that we have the attitudes that we have. Well, once
Hmm.
again, boomers came into a workforce that had an unprecedented labor surge. So anything that added more labor to that labor force, they naturally and by all rights should have detested. Like, but the problem was that mindset is still there. You still hear people say, well, they're coming for our jobs, which is just absolutely categorically not true anymore. And yet they also represent, they're a significant voting bloc and they're significant donors. And I think one of the things I've been trying to get people to understand is that that mindset needed to die off around 2005 to 2010. And we're running out of time. As we talk about in demographic drought, the window for immigration is starting to come to a close. A lot of the countries we get people from have also seen declining birth rates. They are also seeing worker shortages. Mexico has a lower unemployment rate than the US. 65% of Mexican companies reported a labor shortage.
Hmm.
So they're going to start to pull back on the people that they have right at the point that you're going to want them the most. And I feel like these are such critical years. It's time to just have a grown up conversation and say, how do we harness this as a strategic asset and stop talking about it in some crazy terms of it's political, and that's, I do believe that's why.
Interesting, like the jobs you named earlier, bricklayers and policemen, firemen, all these sort of things. These are all jobs that AI is not going to take over,
No,
at least immediately.
no,
Immediately, right?
no, I don't think
So
ever. I mean, robots couldn't take them
yeah,
over. How's AI going to take them over? You can't put out a fire with you sitting at your desk going, put out that fire. Something's going to have to be there to put the fire out.
it's an interesting conundrum because like all these kids went and paid $100,000 to go to college, and they feel entitled to go into like a knowledge type job, but at the same time they missed out on 4, 5, 6 years of actual skill development in
Yeah, this is a great
manual
point.
labor jobs.
So we did a comparison of an electrician at 25 years old, and let's say that that electrician got out of school 18, trained in
Yeah.
their electrician, and then became a master electrician by the time they were like 23, 24. If you look at the salary of an accountant who's now 3 years out of school, because assuming they did 5 years, you could do 4 years out of school with that years of experience, the master electrician is making about double what the accountant makes.
Yeah.
And now what's going to happen is that master electrician doesn't have any debt. So there's
Yeah, yeah,
also,
yeah.
they've built wealth during this entire time. So they have wealth that they're building on as they're growing their salary, versus the person who came out of college who's accumulated a tremendous amount of debt, and now he's going to take them a while before they hit their kind of peak earning years. Well, in the midst of earning your peak earning years or getting to your peak earning years, you're still being controlled by the man, so to speak. Like, you are in a company that's, you're working your way up a career ladder, and you're sitting there going, well, I'd love more workplace flexibility. Meanwhile, the electrician's out there going, I don't want to work today because I'm going to go fishing, or I'm going to go do this. And they have a ton of control of their life. In a lot of cases, by the time they're 30, which was a cousin of mine, they own their own business and they're completely in control at this point. And now they've got people working for them. And I think it's not that we've told people lies. I think it's just what I keep saying is times have changed, but the
It's
narrative
expectations.
didn't.
Yeah,
I,
I
I told
totally
you did it
agree.
wrong, Cole. I told you did it wrong.
Again, I guess it's my fault again. I am curious, Ron. Like, it seems like you just have access to gobs and gobs of data that maybe we all have access to. We just don't know about it. But
Mhm.
is this like part of like what's going on as being an economist at Lightcast? And then also, I don't know, and you're probably the wrong person to ask this question to, but I've been dying to know, which is, what is a soft landing and a hard landing?
Yeah.
I
You
keep
can answer that
hearing
question.
about what are these things like in
Sure.
terms of the economy, and I'm just like, I don't even know what they're talking about.
Yeah.
So maybe you can help there as well.
Okay. First off, I'm wearing my light shirt, so I'm blinging it like a European soccer.
There you go. Good
Uh,
stuff.
so yeah. So First off, I will say this. There is an incredible amount of data out there for people who really want the truth and don't want to just read articles and get lazy about it. I will say this as well. I've been doing this for 32 years. I know where the data is at. More than that, I worked at the Bureau of Labor Statistics for about 8 years. You When I was there, I used to walk around to different programs. Hey, how do you calculate your data? What do you feel how can it be used? How do you think it shouldn't be used? And I think that there's some things through the years where some people will make a big deal out of something. I'm like, no, 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 that's definitely not a big deal. And I wrote an article about it's called the 5 C's of data analysis, but it kind of comes from that of the way that you look at data you have to really make sure that you've looked at it in totality. I wrote my first article at the Bureau way, way long ago. And when I did it, it was my boss redlined almost every word in that article. And I was like, there was no article left. She had just destroyed it. And she sat me down and she said, I'm hearing a lot of you in this. She goes, that's not the way data analysis is done. Your job is to so thoroughly research something that when somebody wants to argue with you, they're arguing data against data, not opinion against opinion. And I'm going to tell you, life changing moment that is, I mean, I was 24 when I heard that. I am much, much, much older than that now, but it's affected everything that I do. It's just making sure that if I were looking at something, what were the questions that I would come up with to go, I don't know if I believe this. Have you accounted for this? And, Cole, what you witnessed in Idaho is, like I say at the beginning, that you're going to get bludgeoned with data because through the years, I've gotten good at tamping down all of the edges. So there's just no gap that you can find to go, yeah, but you didn't account for this. It's like, I've accounted for everything you could possibly account for at this point. That being said, the way I live my life, my motto is it's really great being wrong because no one learned anything ever by being correct. And I love as an economist seeing a data trend going the opposite of what I thought it should do because I'm like, here, I'm about to experience a moment of learning here, and this is going to be really neat. So I think it's really not so much that you're not going after the data. I think it's more of you really need to know why you're going after that data. What question you're trying to answer? How could you question your own self? What do they call it? Interrogate yourself, or how do you do that? I think is a big part of it. And then a hard and soft landing is pretty simple. When inflation gets out of control, the Fed's job is to try to rein that in. Now they only really have one weapon, and that is raising interest rates. And the goal is to limit borrowing so that companies can't expand. And the reason why that was never going to work is during right after the pandemic, corporate profits grew by over 40% in about 5 quarters. And that had never happened in history to have that much gain in corporate profits that short. So companies really don't need to borrow money to keep going because they have the money on hand. What it did do, like I said, really hurt the housing market, which stinks because we can't. Last year was the lowest level of labor mobility state to state we've ever had in history. No one's moving. And I think that causes its own problems. But the concept is that can you get inflation down without destroying everything? So a hard landing is millions of jobs lost, industries devastated, bankruptcies occurring because you're trying to clamp down an economy. A soft landing is inflation comes down very slowly, the unemployment rate barely gains, there's not a whole lot of displacement, industries are able to maintain themselves. All of those kind of things. Hopefully that made sense.
No, that makes perfect sense. And I pulled up a second ago because you mentioned the 5 C's article. One of those C's was context.
Love that one.
And I think it's related to this about the M2 money. Again, I'm speaking out of turn here. I don't know what
I'll walk you through it.
Okay, yeah, please walk us through this.
Yeah, I absolutely love this example. So what was happening was I was starting to see articles everywhere. I was even having people send me things in my email talking about, hey, what we're seeing, this collapse in the M2 money supply has preceded every major significant economic shock in history. And so they were going, look at this decline. And so that's your top graph. Look at that decline. Oh my goodness, the world's ending. And literally these articles are like, get ready. You're going to see devastation like you've never seen. And then there's Ron Hetrick out there going, we're not going to have a recession. You crazy right now? Like we don't have any labor. We can't even lay anybody off right now. And so what I said was, this is an egregious failure of context. So at the top is the same data as the bottom. All I did was move the beginning of the time series back. So all you can see is, you see this grotesque increase in money supply when we threw all this money in it back in around 2000, 2001. And it just got really, really awful because we kept sending people payments, even though they had jobs. And it just got crazy. And this is another reason why you have all this inflation, right? A lot of people have money in their hands, but they weren't working. So a lot of consumers, no producers. So what you have is the Fed has been taking this money back out of the economy. That's one of the mechanisms they can do. You do things a certain way that they pull money back out. And so what you see is this kind of concept of a soft landing, a very gentle slope back down to where it should be. So returning to normal is not a bad thing. It's a fantastic thing. And then in this particular case, the top looks devastating. The bottom is perfection. So that's why it's like, it's always important to have the full picture when you're looking at a data series.
I think that's a really interesting point. Like, we hear about inflation as a result of printing too much money, but we never hear about the opposite, like the Fed pulling money back out of the economy.
They can do that. That's what they do. Yes.
Why aren't you on the news, Ron?
I've been on the news. I tell you, I think
we'll see how the podcast goes when we get you on the news.
It's a funny thing. And if anybody's ever been interviewed by reporters, it's a very funny thing. So last week I interviewed with Bloomberg, and really it was just an idea of, they were kind of just thinking through something. And that call was scheduled maybe 15, 20 minutes. And we talked for 90 minutes. Mm-hmm. And I can tell you, whether it was Time Magazine or Wall Street Journal, which I've talked to many, many times, you name the publication, every time I'm on the phone with them, it's kind of like, Cole, it's like you, like, I'm just like, are we going to get off this call? But they're just like, oh my gosh, if you know this, and you may know something about this. And they keep asking. And I'm like, I do know something about that. And then what happens is, later on, I see my thoughts and ideas showing up in other stories, but I'm not really quoted in it. And I think that there's two ways you can take that. You can have a big ego that gets bruised, or you can feel really honored that you said something that stirred up somebody to go out and investigate it more. And I don't need credited with that. I'm really just, I can say this as honestly as possible. I'm trying to get the message out that a lot of times you're being misled, and you need to know the truth, because the truth in so many senses sets you free. But I think more than anything, it distresses you. And I feel like if somebody writes something where they kind of get you to think more open-mindedly, maybe about immigration or these other things, and I still win. Like, all I was trying to do was get the point across. It's not about my badge.
Well, I've got like 7 other things to talk about with you, Ron, but you want to do some confusion matrix with us?
Let's do something. Let's do this.
The confusion matrix.
Let's do this hockey.
Let's do this hockey. I mean, yeah, you're a hockey guy. You're
I am a hockey
Stanley
guy.
Cup?
I was at a draft last night for our over 50 league, and I'm proud to say that I wasn't drafted last, which should have been a genuine concern.
I can't see your body type, but I'm going to guess you're a right winger.
I'm a left wing.
Wow.
And here's one reason why. Interesting. Growing up in my house, my dad had a left-handed hockey stick.
Yeah, there you go.
And when I was a kid, I just played with this left-handed hockey stick. That's all I ever played with. And when I grew up, I could only play left-hand hockey. My son's right-handed hockey player, but yeah, weird.
That's amazing. It's amazing how like adaptable kids are in that sense, right? Like, how do people become like switch hitters in baseball? I don't know.
Crazy.
Because it feels so foreign.
Yeah, it's like if you ever try to swing a golf club from the other side, you look like you're having a seizure. Yeah.
You like Charles Barkley.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. 5 questions. I did some research. These were guaranteed to be conversation starters. So, like, if it doesn't work, I mean, like, there's 4 fingers pointing back at you. That's all I got to say.
All right.
First, do you have a celebrity crush, or have you ever had a celebrity crush?
I've had a very serious celebrity crush. This is something that I got to see to fruition in a very virtual way. So when I was a kid growing up, I absolutely loved Diane Franklin. She was in Better Off Dead, some other movies back at that time. But that movie, her Monique character with the French accent, which she is not French, but
the neighbor across the street, or the cousin, or whatever she was.
Monique.
Exchange Street. Yeah.
I absolutely adored her. Well, you grow up, you become adults, and one day I'm on Twitter and realize she has a Twitter account, so I start following her, and then she put something up one time, and I commented underneath it, and I'm like, da 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 da, and then she commented back, and then we commented back, and I commented, And so I
Look
mean,
at
you wouldn't have believed the glow on my face when I went to my wife and said, I just talked to them. Yes, it was
You
on
better
Twitter
mind
like
your
a
P's
total
and Q's.
nerd, but it happened. It's a real thing here.
I can just see it happening too.
It's
That's
funny because
great,
probably
Ron.
at
Oh,
that
that's
time I'm 50 years old and I'm like 3 years old at that point. I'm like, yes, yes.
Have you ever heard of like the intersection theory where it's like you start at a lower level than the celebrity, then eventually as age catches up,
Yeah,
like you intersect and like you actually become like more
we probably are in
sexually
that moment right
desirable?
now, as long as people can handle Doom as being popular.
Cole, any quick ones?
That girl, she was in 10 Things I Hate About You, and then I think she was in the Jason Bourne series.
Oh,
I
not
don't know her name actually, but I
not
always thought she
Kirsten
was really cool.
Dunst.
I don't know who that is.
She's not even that famous,
You
but
talking?
like
Isn't 10 Things I Hate About? Oh no,
Styles?
yeah.
Julia Styles?
oh no, I'm thinking of the wrong movie. Sorry, it's
Yeah,
that one with Heath Ledger. It's another teenage movie.
yeah.
It's
No,
Heath Ledger and this girl, and they're in high school.
that is
Yeah,
10 Things I Hate
that's
About.
Julia Styles,
Yeah, that's
right?
Is
Julia
that okay?
Stiles.
I
Yeah.
didn't know her name, but I always thought she was really cool.
That was filmed in Tacoma, just south of me, and like that University High School and that football field is legit real. It's amazing. It's
Yeah.
legit real.
Legit.
The second question, I'll go Emily Pelosi. I don't know if she's an actual celebrity, but
Whoa, whoa. Well, we're hitting on previous guests. All right, cool.
Wow.
she's awesome. I love her so much. Well, I mean, this kind of goes along with your previous one, Ron. Any celebrity meet and greets? Have you ever met a celebrity? Which I guess you kind of
So
have.
I'll count this as a celebrity just because it was awesome for me. But my oldest son has cerebral palsy, and because of that, he was involved in an organization where we got to go over to the Players Championship because I live close to TPC here in
Mm-hmm.
Jacksonville, and at this event, a lot of the pro golfers would come in. Well, turns out one of those pro golfers, which is Jim Furyk, is from Pittsburgh. And I started talking to him, and we just really, really, really hit it off. And so every time there was any event, I just end up with him and just talk. And I think our
You
record
became buddies.
we were
That's
about 2 hours that
amazing.
we talked at one event. And what I learned about it, which is an ultra critical thing, and I've learned it with musicians, which I've met a few over my life. As long as you don't talk to them about what they do, they'll talk to you forever.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they probably crave just
Telling you.
natural conversation as opposed to "I love you so much for."
You don't. I
being a
did it one
golfer."
time, and it killed the conversation. And he turned away, and I was like, "Never do it again." And then from that point on, anytime I saw him, I'd be like, "Hey, you've been watching the Pens this season?" He's like, "Well, I mean, I'm in the hotel room. It's this harder. I'm trying to get it on my phone." I'm like, "Yeah, I have I have the NHL package." And he goes, "Yeah, I was going to do it." And literally, he'll just literally as normal as anything. You can talk forever, but do
Damn,
not bring up golf.
he
Don't bring
applied
up golf.
Skinnerian operant conditioning on your ass and like just turned away from you.
Yeah, hey, and I respected that because I thought I have a lot of people when I'm at parties want to talk to me about the economy, and I'm like, right now, when I've had a couple of drinks, like, we really want to do this, or I'd rather talk about
You
music.
went home to your wife and was like, God, this guy named Cole like came and just like whipped my
That's a
ass about
professional
economy.
fun. So good.
I'm sorry, Ron. I apologize.
No. Something like that. We were at that event, and I tell you what, in that event, it's literally my mission is this is what I'm good at. If you talk to me about things that I'm not good at, then that would be no fun. But I don't mind that.
Yeah, fair enough. I
Any
won't
celebrities,
ask
Cole?
any more questions.
Any
No,
celebrities,
please
Cole?
do.
You meet a lot of
Please.
people.
I actually don't think I've ever really had a conversation with a celebrity, so I don't know if I qualify for this.
I'll go Emily Pelosi again. I've met her.
By the way, I've met a lot of pro golfers, the really, really cool ones. Luke Donald is awesome. His wife's great too. Davis Love the third.
Mhm.
Wonderful
Yeah.
guy, incredible with my son at the time. Charlie Hoffman, also an incredibly cool guy. As far as the wives are concerned, Phil Mickelson's wife, Amy, we hit it off actually quite a bit. So that at the end of the day, when I left, she was hugging me, crying on my shoulder. And I thought, well, this has got to be one of the most surreal moments ever. And I literally was looking over at my wife like, you see this? Do you see what's happening? But we had some really deep conversations. So yeah, you just never know. You just never know.
Have you met any golfers that have run over a police and been arrested?
I actually never met him.
I hear he's the nicest guy ever. Yeah, just in the interest of time, we'll go quickly. One more. Bucket list. Any sort of things that you haven't accomplished that you want to accomplish?
I'm going to give you the weirdest thing ever. I want to go to Norway.
No, that's legit. That's legit.
I've
Why?
seen it so many times, and I don't know why, but there's something weird inside of me that's just drawn to it. And I want to get in a car and I just want to drive up north, like way
You want
up
to
there,
go on the
where
fjord?
yeah, where the fjords are all at, and just I don't know. There's something about it. It's like a call of the wild type of thing. I've had friends who've gone there, and I look at the pictures, and I'm just like, just so jealous. Like it's weird. There's probably there, and of course, like maybe the northern part of Italy, wine country and stuff, which I'd like to see. But
Yeah.
I am a kind of person. I really don't like big cities. I really don't like being around a lot of people. It's not that I don't like people. It's just that I do really well going to places than driving away from them out into the like out into the wilderness, more things. So yeah, countries where they're more kind of sparsed out, where I could just witness the beauty of the land is kind of that's my bucket list.
I thought you were going a different direction. I'd love to go to Norway and just like go to a sauna and do like the cold plunge and the whole bit, or just go right to the
There's no
lake.
cold plunges for Ron Hetrick. I cannot believe people do it. God bless
it's
you.
it's it
Not,
has the same effect as like smelling salt. It's definitely like, oh my god, I'm alive.
I don't need that. I feel like people who do plunge baths are probably the same people who got into cutting. I don't know. It's just a weird. I don't need pain to know I'm alive.
I need something to feel, just to feel something.
Exactly. This world's too stressful. If I plunge, maybe my brain will go numb for a while. I don't know.
This conversation is so weird. I love it.
Hey Cole, what you got? What do you want to accomplish?
I was actually thinking about this the other day. I meet these people sometimes, and they're like, I've done X, Y, Z in all 50 states, right? So
Mm.
like and I think it would be cool to play golf in all 50 states. I was thinking about that the other day. I think that would be a really cool thing to do. And I immediately thought, I was like, I wonder what golf is like in Alaska. That was my second thought. I was like, what's it going to be like?
They have some of these courses that are like 100 miles long, right? Where you like,
Do they?
like in Africa, like you like hit a golf ball and like get in your car and.
He said states, man. You went right to Africa.
I don't. Yeah, I just got back from Scotland and St. Andrews, and I walked the course, and it was absolutely beautiful, and like it was just as green as you could be, and it's just like Seattle with like the clouds and the mist, and the waves on the ocean are breaking against the rocks, and I was like, okay, hey buddies, like how long is this gonna be? It's gonna be like 5 hours, like. Shit, that's a long time to like walk. Like I think I have 14. I gave up. I was like, I'm going to the clubhouse. Go get a beer. Go get a tenant.
Because of the wind and the cold and stuff.
Well, I just wore khaki slacks, and I was not real prepared.
They're
I
covered in rain gear.
I didn't think it was gonna be like mini golf and like take like 30 minutes or anything like that, but I wasn't prepared for 5 hours.
I would love to. My son's going to be in Scotland tomorrow. He's in school in London right now, and I'm so jealous. Once again, he was in Wales last weekend, and once again, that's a beautiful place, and that's really what I like. I like seeing beautiful places.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, well, let's. You ready to do some nerdery, Ron?
Fire 'em.
The nerdery. All right, I'll kick us off, Scott, with our friend of the podcast, Ethan Mullick, who we've talked about plenty of times on here about AI, and just we couldn't go without saying about the Chat GPT 4.0 release. And one of the things that came out as a part of this release was that Chat GPT can now do data analysis. And so they have a little video on this post. I'm not going to play it. But essentially, you know how there's like some of those R packages or Python packages that will now do exploratory data analysis out of the box if you just put in certain commands? It appears that if you just use prompts like analyze this, visualize it, do sophisticated analysis, including statistical analysis, and tell me what it means, that ChatGPT 4.0 can pretty much automate exploratory data analysis. And so I thought that was a fascinating revelation. And I don't know, what do you guys think about this?
Copilot can do it now. We were with one of the chief developer or overseers of their development crew with Microsoft this past week, and he was saying, I was just talking about, boy, it'd be great if you could do this, and he's like, yeah.
Yeah.
Man, have you used Copilot? I'm like, no, my daughter has. I must be ancient. And but this, I'm going to say something around this real quick, and that is, it's interesting when you talk to the people who are developing, at the forefront of AI, like literally the ones developing it, whether it be the Chat GPT people or even Microsoft, and how because they're invested heavily in it. You will never hear them say anything ever about replacing. It's like the very jobs that they're trying to improve, they have the people doing those jobs are the ones helping develop the tools, because they want these people to develop the tools in a way that it's the people go, man, I love this for my job, not
Yeah.
I love this to take my job. And I think we're on a collision course. This is way above the topic we're talking about, but real quick, I think we're on a collision course with CEOs' expectations of how they're going to cut cost with it by getting rid of labor, and the reality of the people who are developing or starting to implement it and going, look how much more effective we can get people quicker. So when we hire somebody brand new, we can get them up to speed so much faster. We can, get them more productive. And I think they really were trying to make productivity tools. And somehow it turned into they're coming to take your jobs.
That's a super positive outlook that we haven't really heard on the podcast yet, because like you do look at it, it's very like hell, like this would take me like a day to code, or whatever
Mhm.
it take to like get through this sort of thing. But I think you're right. It's like the cost of intelligence is coming down with these sort of tools, and like now we don't have to take on one project, we can take on 5 projects
Bingo.
and find 5 different insights, and help the other employees in the workforce, whatever it is. But I really like that positive outlook. I will say, like, kind of like backing up to the actual tool,
Mhm.
we were seeing these sort of things being done a year ago, such as like I had a friend that showed 88% classification accuracy from text data that they were trying to like show this sort of thing. Uh, but what is wild to me is how quickly we're seeing the advances and these sort of technologies. Like it was about a year between the time that ChatGPT 3 came out and 4, and now it's like a 6 month cycle, and they're like we're quickly going to like a 3 month cycle, and it's things are getting wild, boy.
Important point on this stuff, and I mean, people would debate me on this, and that's fine. I come from this world. If you prompt something and it makes you a song, are you a musician? If you prompt something and it paints you a picture, are you an art?
Yeah,
If I see a video of a motor being built, does that make me a mechanic? If I let ChatGPT do my statistical analysis, am I a data analyst? And for me, the easy answer on all this is no. You're nothing more than somebody who's playing around with a video game. Like you could generate
yeah.
music using video games a long time ago, but that doesn't make you. That's not your gift. That's not what you're good at. You're using this to take a swipe at something because maybe you couldn't pay a musician, you couldn't pay a data analyst, and you just need something. And there's times when something works and that's good enough. But in the hands of a person who's not something, if I'm not a mechanic and I saw a video being built, it's kind of like the Spies Like Us movie. You know, I could read a book about how to do surgery, but you can see like the second he goes to like inside, it's like you realize the terror of what it takes when you're not skilled at something. And now I'm quoting all kinds of movies, swingers, you
Yeah,
got
yeah.
air claws and you're just mauling this thing, but you're not handling it. You're
You're so
mauling it.
money. You're
Yeah,
so
and
money
it's
right
still
there.
money, baby. And I think that is what I see. Like when you say, "Well, I want this tool to do the statistical analysis," and so it does it, and then it gets done. And now what? Now, are you any smarter than you were before? The answer is no. Only if you already know statistical analysis are you going to be blown away by what you see back. Only will you be able to look at something and go, you know what? In this case, that should not have been a negative correlation. I got to see what I did in the data. Maybe there's something I'm not understanding about the way these data sets relate to each other. You still have to have the intelligence to know what you're looking at.
It's a really good point, and also like it doesn't replace those sort of things you learn in the first like 2 or 3 months of grad school, i.e., like how to set up a natural experiment and
Mm-hmm.
understand your different groups
Yep.
and what they mean. Like not to mention like what the underlying statistics mean.
Well, and much along that line of thinking, name a job that AI has fully replaced already, like all components of it. Like I can't even think of one that has replaced half,
Well,
right?
the graphics designers will tell you something very different because that was the big thing. The graphic artists all got released from whatever that photo company was. To that,
Yeah,
I would say
Adobe.
I like the way you first worded it, which is, so if I use a graphics tool to build me,
Mhm.
a logo, I, not being a graphics person, could look at that and go, that's a good logo.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, a person who builds good logos would go, that is a horrible logo. And
Correct.
you're seeing this already in so many things. And I love what people's immediate response is, what's in its infancy? It's going to get a lot better. Well, this concept in and of itself becomes a little perverse, because all AI is doing, and it was funny, the Microsoft guy goes, I can't stand when people say it's artificial intelligence, because all it is taking everybody's intelligence, plagiarizing it and slamming it together, and then saying, well, I came to these inferences because I slammed all of these thoughts together. And then you go, well, where'd you get that from? And it's like, well, I can't tell you that. I don't know. And then you're like, what? Or always say, I got it from this. And that's not true. It's, it doesn't know where it got it from because it deals in probabilities. But the problem with AI, and my colleague Will was talking about this, and we've talked about this before, is it's trapped in time. So you can't innovate with AI because it only is looking backwards and scraping. The only ability you have to come up with something new is to say something new, and then you put that in there. But like, it can help you find maybe relationships that you didn't know exist. Great. Hopefully we can find a cure for some kind of cancer as a result of it. Show me that when it happens, and I'm going to be so happy. But here's the thing. If it does come up with that, man, there's going to be a lot of people employed working through the experiments, working through the marketing, working through this, working through it. The drug doesn't invent itself. It doesn't test people. It doesn't sit at their bedside and measure these things. It's
Hmm.
alongside of the people every step of the way. The people feeding the models, looking at the output, looking for those relationships that this thing is saying it's found. Never at any point am I getting rid of people. I just need those people to be smart. I really need their expertise now, because now I'm looking at output and I don't know if I'm being fooled or not.
That's so Raven.
I think that means it's time to move to our next article.
So this is a really fascinating. It's from Economist. How much influence does a professor have on the research direction of their students? So we all went to grad school.
Yeah.
Did you have like a professor that actually? Well, I mean, like Ron, like you had a colleague at the Bureau of Labor Statistics that like directed your life out of you. This is a
Yeah.
little bit different from that. But this paper examines the role of university teachers in sharing or shaping the scientific revolution in England, which, of course, like before that, they were not really much of a research powerhouse, but came out of it as a research powerhouse. So they had a corpus of 100,000 students at Oxford and Cambridge, as well as who their professors were. And then they used LLMs to classify the 300,000 publications that emerged from these students. So it's like 1600 to 1800.
Hmm.
They also had a naturalistic experiment, which I didn't fully understand, but essentially some sort of like civil war broke out in England, and a lot of the students from one university were kicked out of,
Hmm.
I think, out of Cambridge, and they were replaced by Oxford students. And the upshot is, for a 100% increase in teacher publications that led to a 3% increase in student publications on the same topic
Mm-hmm.
related to the scientific
Sure.
revolution. And if you extrapolate that out,
That's
so one
natural.
standard deviation increase led to a 13% increase in student publications later on.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Something that's tough to quantify, but super cool to see how professors shape the future academic publications of their students.
Cool, or a little disturbing. I would say
Yeah, I
this.
actually hate it.
I feel that a good professor, and I feel like we don't have a lot of really good ones. A good professor presents both sides of things in an incredibly fair way. I mean, the best professors I can remember were the ones that, it's like Karate Kid, the new remake of Karate Kid, when you start off going, but I thought they were the enemy. Oh, wait, no, they're the enemy. Wait, are they the enemy? Wait, who's the good? Wait, they're the good person. And then one episode later, like, no, they're the bad person. And I think that that's what a good professor should always be, showing you all different kinds of things so that you're inspired to take thoughts that you gain out of that to see if you can prove one point or another. And I feel like that's not what happens a lot of the cases. I feel like people are led down paths. I can certainly point to certain things that I won't bring up because they're controversial. But I remember sitting here and telling professors, I'm like, do you ever question this stuff? Because it sounds ridiculous to me that you're even saying it. And I think that it requires the students to be really sharp and open-minded in themselves, that you're not just a sheep just kind of following, well, the professor said this, and then you kind of just follow that path. And I mean, I think there's good and there's bad. I think I think it's natural. I will say this because a lot of people do go to schools because there are certain professors who are doing certain things that they're interested in. So it's a natural outpouring of that. You're going to do research related to maybe these people that influenced you, and that's okay. I would just beg that the person maintain their own perspective in that and don't let their perspective be influenced by those that influence them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if a professor's perspective is de-incentivizing someone from staying away from what the data says, right? Kind of to your
Yeah,
point from earlier that you said about BLS, like not arguing opinion versus opinion, but data versus data. If the data is saying one thing, but you're being encouraged to do another,
ooh,
that just seems unethical, in my opinion.
and there's a lot of that going on. And I
Yeah.
think anytime, just as a rule of life, what I always told the people that I trained is anytime you get a data set, I want you to make sure you know where it came from and what's their motivation. Because a lot of times industries will investigate an issue, but they paid somebody to do it to prove a point that they were
Yeah.
doing. So sometimes just ask if you can see the questions. How were they phrased? Sometimes people ask a yes no question to something that clearly should have been on a scale because it's not a binary answer. And a lot of times they're doing it because they're trying to force you into saying no, for example, and they're like, everybody's opposed to this. And it's like, well, the way you stated it, well, I'm opposed to that, but I'm not opposed to it in general. So things like that are important.
The nature of research is you don't know if you're right or not in the long term, right? So like you can have a point of view or like a theoretical track, but whether that pays off in the end is questionable. The article actually gets into like some of the older professors at these universities shied away from scientific studies, like forget about experimental and control groups, and they actually got their students to publish in the opposite direction. I mean, this is a different atmosphere too, where this is kind of like a history paper if you start reading through it of stuff I didn't know. Like, so the professors would live with the students, they would eat with the students, they spent all their time together in the universities and these like little colleges in Cambridge and Oxford. So they had, and to me, this is like a network analysis paper. Someone with an immense influence, immense amount of contact with the students, and of course they're going to shape their lives. And the fact that they only shaped it by a 3% increase in publications on these topics is actually kind of shocking that it's that
Well,
small.
that to me was the most fascinating part of the article was the methods. Like
Mm-hmm.
they,
Yeah.
they went back and they did basically research over 200 years of graduates and students. And like this isn't something you could have done 20 years ago, like this type of research. And so I mean, this is fascinating type of work and being able to use, LLMs to try to connect, professors to students. Like you can just do research at a scale that I almost can't even imagine coming up with the research hypothesis to test like that was to me is the coolest part of it.
Oh, you're talking about like the sheer computing power to
Yeah.
do it. Like, so of course, like to test someone's lifetime output, you need
Yeah.
80 years, right?
Yeah, someone that I was my wife and I were visiting my son out at Florida State, and we were kind of touring around, and we went into one of the buildings, and they had like their law library, and I remember just walking in and just books this wide, just around this entire shelf. And these are all things around law. And I thought I would love it if these things were all fed in, how many contradictions you'd find.
Yeah.
Like one law passed that really kind of contradicted this one, or when did this happen? Because you know that everybody hasn't memorized every word of all, you know, thousand of these books that are sitting on these shelves. But you're always like, well, what's in these books? Like that's when you think about like a co-pilot thing. Go summarize this book for me, and it'll probably kick back. It's worthless. It's nonsense or anything. But, yeah,
Like, can you imagine like being in school in like the 1600s or whatever? Be like, you got to be real fucking sure of what you want to research when you go in that library. It's not like I'm just gonna like Google and poke around. Like
yeah.
I am
Oh my
looking for
goodness.
this book, and I
Pulling
am
out
gonna go
phone
find it.
tablets at that.
Literal tablets, right?
This is a fascinating conversation. I enjoyed the heck out of it.
I
I
did too.
promise when I see you out in public anymore, I won't ask you any more economics
I would
based
be
questions.
disappointed if you didn't, because I am here as a resource. I would just say if we're ever at a party and you interrupt me talking to somebody about like a music group that I like to ask me an economics question, just I would think twice about that. But if I'm just standing there, it's all good.
Fair enough. Scott, any final words for Ron?
Ron, it's a pleasure to meet you.
Good.
How can folks reach out if they want to get to know you or Lightcast?
Yeah, the thing that I recommend more than anything is follow me on LinkedIn. If you want to interact with me, by all means, like hit me up on LinkedIn. It's Ron L. as in Larry Hetrick, Ron L. Hetrick. A lot of people, for some reason, think it's a capital I. I'm like, but you know that the internet doesn't do uppercase. Okay, whatever. But yeah, Ron L. Hetrick on LinkedIn, and check out my post. If you do follow me, you're going to find all kinds of things that are going to make you viscerally react. I highly encourage you to scroll back through the things that I put up. You can kind of see all the different things that I like to talk about. It's not that I'm trying to be interesting. I'm just trying to sometimes just deflate things that I'm seeing in the news that is scaring people.
Oh, you're doing fantastic work, Ron, and I wouldn't have it any other way. So keep doing what you're doing. But thanks so much for joining us today. And you've been listening to Directionally Correct, a People Analytics podcast with Colin Scott, and today's guest, Ron Hetrick. Thanks, Ron. Directionally Correct is dedicated to you, our listeners, to help educate and entertain you on how to effectively do people analytics. By supporting this podcast, you are helping us continue to provide valuable insights and knowledge to our listeners. Please consider becoming a patron of the podcast. You can find the link to sign up in the show notes or at patron.podbean.com/directionallycorrect. Thanks for your support.